This weekend, I want us to continue our series on God's amazing promises. Over 7,000 of them in Scripture. And I specifically this weekend want us to look at one that you may not think is real appropriate for you until I explain it. And that is God's promises to you when you're afraid of failing. When you are afraid of failing. Now, you may not think that that's a problem with you, but we don't always realize how big a deal it is. So I want to begin with a little quiz. We're not always self-aware about the fears that are inside of us. So let me read you 9 tests of do you have a fear of failure. Number 1, do you ever worry about what other people think about you? That's the fear of failure. Do you ever worry about your ability to go after a dream or a desire that's in your heart, but you thought, maybe, I don't know if I could do that or not. I dream of doing it, but I don't know if I could. That's the fear of failure. Do you ever worry that people will lose interest in you? Maybe people who are close to you, people who love you. Maybe, do you ever worry that people won't think you are smart or competent? And I've got to hide. I don't want people to know that I really don't think I'm that smart. Do you ever worry about disappointing people whose opinion you value? Have you ever told anybody beforehand that you don't expect to succeed in a project in order to lower their expectations? That's the fear of failure. Do you ever get last-minute headaches, stomach aches, or other physical symptoms while preparing for something you think is important? That's the fear of failure. Do you ever get distracted or often get distracted by things that prevent you from completing your preparation, which were not as urgent as they seemed at the time? You get distracted. Number 9, do you tend to procrastinate and run out of time when you have to prepare for something? The fear of failure is behind most procrastination. Now, these are 9 common symptoms of the fear of failure. Now, no matter how successful you are in some areas of your life, there are others that you're scared to death about and you fail at. In fact, you fail in more areas of your life than you succeed. All of us do. Nobody can be good at everything. And so you're only really good at a few things. So that means most of the things in life you're not good at. You're a failure at. And we often don't want people to know that, and that anxiety causes us great problems. Now, the fear of failure will paralyze your potential. It will keep you from becoming all God intends for you to be. It will limit your purpose in life. The fear of failure is deathly. It will kill your dreams if you let them. It will rob your happiness. It will prevent your success. It can keep you single if you want to get married. The fear of failure. I could give you 100 negative things that the fear of failure does in your life. And so what I want to do today is talk about God's promises for the fear of failure. Now, this is so important. Jesus told a whole story about the fear of failure. It's called the parable of the talents. Now, we actually get our word talent from this story. Today, when I say the word talent, you think of abilities like a musical talent or a mathematical talent or mechanical talent or a sports talent. But we actually get the word talent from this story in the Bible. But in the Bible days, the word talent was actually a measurement of gold. Specifically, a talent of gold was amount of gold equal to the weight of a normal human being. So we're talking about an enormous amount of money. One talent would easily be worth over $1 million. A talent of gold, it is an exorbitant amount of money. Not just now, but in those days too. And Jesus tells this story about a fear of failure to represent how we're supposed to handle it. Let me read you the story. It's right here in Matthew chapter 25. Jesus told this story. A business owner was going to leave on a long journey, so he called his 3 servants together and he entrusted his wealth to them. To one servant, he gave 5 talents of money. That's a lot of money, maybe 5 million or more. To another, he gave 2 talents of money, and to a third servant, he gave 1 talent of money. That's still $1 million. And he did this each according to his own ability. And then he, the master, went on a journey. Now the servant who was entrusted with 5 talents went at once and used his money to gain back 5 more talents. In other words, he doubled his money. He made 100% on his investment. Pretty good investment. He had 5, now he's got 10. In the same way, the servant who was entrusted 2 talents, put his talents of money to work, and he gained 2 more. Again, he gets 100% return on his money, doubles his money. But the servant who had been given just the 1 talent did nothing. He went out and he dug a hole in the ground and he buried his master's money to keep it safe. Now, after a long time, the master of those 3 servants returned, and he asked each servant to give an account of what they had done with the money they had been entrusted with. Now, the man who had received 5 talents brought the other 5 that he had gained, and he said, "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 5 talents, and see, I've gained 5 more for you here." His master replied, "Well done, you good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, so now I'm going to put you in charge of many greater things." Now, this is a parable, and Jesus is talking about he's invested in you, and he's asking you when you get ready to come to heaven, what did you do with what I gave you? My job as your spiritual coach, my job as your pastor, is to prepare you for the day when God says, what did you do with what I gave you? What I entrusted you, what I loaned to you, the talent that I loaned to you. And he said, I've doubled. And he said, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. Now I'm going to put you in charge of more, greater responsibility. Come and share your master's happiness. That's what I want God to say to you when you get to heaven. Now then the man who had received 2 talents gave his account. "Master," he said, "you entrusted me with 2 talents, and I've gained for you 2 more. And his master said, well done to you, good and faithful servant. You also have been faithful with a few things. So now I'll put you in charge of many larger things. Come and share your master's happiness." Now, the last part of the story is there on your outline if you're taking notes. But the servant who had been given just 1 talent said, "I was afraid I'd lose it." Now, if you're taking notes, circle on your outline the word afraid, because this is the fear of failure. He said, "I was afraid I'd lose what you gave me. So I hid your talent, the talent that you gave me." In other words, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I played it safe. "I went out and I buried it in the ground." Some of you have buried the talents that God has given you, and you're not using them. You're not using God's talents for his glory. "I went out and I buried it in the ground, and now I'm handing it back to you." Now, what's the master's reaction? That made the master mad. And he said, "You lazy and wicked servant." He said, "You should have at least put it in the bank where it would gain some interest." He goes, you didn't even put it in the bank. You just hid it in the ground. He said, "But you did nothing with what I gave you." Okay, everybody look up here just a minute. My greatest fear in life would be that you stand before God someday and God says to you, "You did nothing with what I gave you. You did nothing with the talent I gave you. You just used it on yourself. You didn't make a difference in the world. You didn't make the world a better place. You didn't serve anybody else. You just served yourself. You did nothing with what I gave you." It is my responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen to you, and it is your responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen to you too. He says, "You did nothing with what I gave you." So the master, this is God, says, "I'm taking back the 1 talent I gave you, and I'm going to give it to the man who multiplied the 10 talents that I gave him. To those who use well what I give them, they will be given even more." Now, this is a principle of the universe that God has established. Whatever you use well in life, God will give you more of it. If you use your time well, God will give you more time. If you use your money well, God will give you more money. If you use your energy well, God will give you more energy. If you use the talent that he's put in you, he will give you more talent. On the other hand, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. Talent that sits on the shelf rots. It wastes. It goes away. And you lose it. And God says, I'm going to give it to the guy out there who's using the 10 talents. Now he's going to have 11. This is a principle of the universe. And so you've got to get rid of the fear of failure. I was afraid, and I hid it in the ground. Now, this is a pretty harsh reaction if you look at it. He says, you're lazy, you're wicked, and I'm going to take away what I gave you in the first place and give it to somebody else because you're not using what I gave you for the way I intended it. Here's the point of the story. You never please God by playing it safe. You never please God by playing it safe. Now follow me on the logic of this. If you don't take any risks in life, you don't need any faith. And if you don't have any faith, then at that point you are being unfaithful. Let me say it again. If you're not taking any risks in your life for the benefit of other people, for the glory of God, you're not taking any risk, then you don't need any faith. And if you don't have any faith, then at that point you are being unfaithful. And God says, that's wicked. It's not just lazy, it's wrong, it's evil. I made you to make a difference with your life, not just live for yourself.
Hi, this is Rick, and thanks for joining me today. You know, this month on Daily Hope, we're offering to send you a special copy of my book called The Purpose of Christmas. I wrote this book to help you come to a deeper understanding of God's love for you by explaining the 3 purposes of Christmas that were announced by the angel at the birth of Jesus. The angel announced a time of celebration. I bring you good news of great joy. Salvation, for unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. And reconciliation, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Daily Hope is a 100% listener-supported ministry, so if you can help us continue to spread the good news through this broadcast, I'd appreciate any gift that you can send. I'll send you the hardback edition of this book, The Purpose of Christmas, as our special thank you for your gift of support to Daily Hope Ministries.
So you can see how important it really is for us to get rid of the fear of failure in our lives so we're not hiding our talents in the ground. How do I do that? Well, the Bible has a lot to say about this, a ton to say about it. What I want to do today is just give you a quick overview, and we're going to look at 4 things you need to remember, 4 truths to remember, and then 4 action steps to take on how to reduce the fear of failure in your life. This is a good week for you to come to church. Take out a pencil and write these down, because I don't want you ending your life and having God say to you, you did nothing with what I gave you. You didn't use it the way I intended you to do. So what God gives you is his gift to you, those talents. What you do with your talents is your gift back to God. So how can I neutralize the fear of failure in my life? Well, first, there are 4 things you need to remember. Write these down. Number 1, first thing is to remember is that everybody fails in many ways. That's a fear reducer. When I realize I'm not the only one. Everybody, every single person in the world fails in many, many different ways. The failure rate of human beings is 100%. No one is perfect. We are all flawed. If there was a club for failures, we could all join. We're all qualified to join a club for failures. If at first you don't succeed, you're normal. If at first you don't succeed, you're human. If at first you don't succeed, welcome to the human race. Everybody fails in many ways. Now here's what the Bible says. James chapter 3, verse 2. We all stumble in many ways. How many of you have ever stumbled? Can I see your hands? All right, that's 100%. How many of you have ever stumbled in public in front of other people? Can I see that? Has anybody ever stumbled like at a graduation? You know, you're walking across stage and you fall. All right, a few of you, God bless you. All right. Any of you ever stumble at your wedding? Anybody stumble at their wedding? A couple people here, all right. Now, what happens when we see somebody stumble, they're walking across stage and they fall flat on their face? We wince. We all sympathize when people stumble. Why? Because we've all done it. And we all know how humiliating and how painful it is to stumble publicly in front of other people. Everybody stumbles. We've all stumbled in many ways, and so we identify with them. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 20 says this: there is no one on earth who always does what is right all the time and never makes a mistake. We all stumble. You know, in baseball, if you only strike out 7 out of 10 times, you're a superstar. That means if you're batting 300, which means when you go to bat, 7 out of 10 times you strike out, you're the guy who gets paid $300 million. Why? Because even superstars strike out more than they get on base. If you're in the NBA, you're a basketball player, if you make 50% of your shots, you're LeBron James. You're a superstar. That means you miss half the time. And that makes you the best because you only miss half the time. And so the Bible tells us that everybody fails in many ways. So welcome to the club. It's not a big deal. We overstress the importance of failure. Failure is not a big deal. Everybody fails every day of their life in many ways. Number 2, remember, no failure is final unless I give up. No failure is final unless I give up. Now, failure is not fatal. It's not going to kill you. It's not terminal. It's not deadly. Failure is not fatal, and failure is not final unless you choose to go, okay, I'm giving up. I'm not even going to try. And that's your fault. The fact is, the fear of failure is far worse in your life than failure. Failure is not a big deal. But the fear of failure is a really big deal. It's worse than failure. You fearing failure is worse than actually failing. Why? Because failure is a one-time shot, but fear of failure just goes on and on and on. It haunts you for hours and days and weeks and months and even years. The fear of failure can haunt you your entire life. Failure is short-term. Fear of failure is long-term. And when you have the fear of failure, then you don't even try, which makes you a failure. So you might as well go ahead and do it. Did you follow the logic of that? Okay? If you fear it, you're not even going to try, which means you're going to fail. So the fear just guaranteed, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, here's one of my favorite verses in the Bible, Proverbs 24, verse 16. For even though a righteous man falls 7 times, he rises again. Now, what I like about this is it says even good guys stumble. Even righteous people fall. Even godly people make mistakes. He's saying righteous people fall. And they don't just fall once, they fall 7 times. What makes a righteous person righteous? They get back up. They don't stay down. This is the quality of resilience, bounce back ability. And he's saying, if you want to be a righteous woman of God, you want to be a righteous man of God, one of the things you got to learn is resilience, which means you're going to stumble, but you get back up. A righteous man, he stumbles 7 times, he still gets back up. It's the unrighteous person who says, I quit, I tried once, it doesn't work, I give up. You see, there are a lot of factors in your life that are beyond your control that can cause failure. But if you get back up again, who knows what's going to happen? I did a study this week of famous failures who kept going and wouldn't quit. I could give you about 100 of these people, but let me just give you a few, because history books are filled with biographies of people who failed and failed and failed and failed, but would not give up. And then they succeeded. Here are a few. General George Washington, first president of the United States, lost 2/3 of all the battles he fought against the British in the American Revolution. I studied the American Revolution. In the first couple years of the Revolutionary War, Washington lost almost every single battle. He's backing up. He's retreating, because he doesn't have the manpower to take on the British. But he would not give up. He lost 2 out of every 3 battles in the Revolutionary War. Lost more than he won. But he eventually won the war and became the first president and founder of our nation. How about Napoleon? Napoleon graduated 42nd in his class, a class of 43 people. Not exactly a brilliant guy, okay? But then he went on and conquered Europe, okay? How about Albert Einstein? You're not going to believe this, but Albert Einstein did not learn to speak. He didn't say a single word until he was over 4 years old. Any parent who has a child who doesn't say its first words until 4 years old, you think something's wrong with this child. They're probably stunted in their intellectual ability. Einstein did so poorly in school, all of his professors, all of his teachers said he'd be a failure. In fact, he failed at math. And he did so poorly in school at age 16, he failed to pass the entrance exam for the Swiss Polytechnic School. When he finally did get accepted into a college, he struggled so much that he nearly dropped out. And then he reinvented science and math. Babe Ruth hit 831 home runs in baseball, but he struck out 1,330 times. For years, Babe Ruth led the league in strikeouts, not just home runs. The Bible tells us no failure is final, but a righteous man gets up and rises again. Look at this next verse, Galatians 6:9. We must never get tired of doing good, because if we don't give up in the struggle, we will get our harvest at the proper time. If you keep on going, you don't let failure be final, you never know what's going to happen. Let me read you about this guy. At age 7, this little boy, at age 7, his family was forced out of their home, and he had to go to work to help support the family. At 7 years of age, he went to work. At age 9, he's still a shy little boy. His mother died. At age 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. He wanted to go to law school, but his education wasn't good enough. Age 23, he went into debt to become a partner in a small store. 3 years later, his partner died, leaving him a huge debt, which took years to repay. At age 28, after dating a young woman for 4 solid years, he asked her to marry him, and she said no. In his 30s, he ran for public office, and he lost. A couple years later, he ran again, and he lost again. At 37 years of age, on his 3rd attempt to run for office, he's finally elected to Congress. But 2 years later, when he ran for re-election, he lost again. And he had a nervous breakdown as a result. At 41, in an unhappy marriage, his 4-year-old son died. At 42, he ran to be elected as the land officer, and he lost. At 45, he ran for the Senate in the United States, and he lost again. A few years later, he ran for vice presidency, and he lost again. At 49 years of age, he ran for the Senate and lost again. And then at 51, he was elected president of the United States. His name was Abraham Lincoln. What if Lincoln had said, I'm just going to give up on the first time I ran for office? He lost like 8 or 9 times before he finally was elected president of the United States and saved the Union and saved the history of America. You don't know what's in store for you. All of those past failures could be just prologue for your future. Failure is not the worst thing that can happen to you. There's a lot worse things than failure. So don't exaggerate. Here's the third thing you need to remember. First, remember everybody fails many ways. Second, no failure is final till you just choose to give up. Third, remember that failure is the path to success if I'm humble and willing to learn from it. If I'm humble and willing to learn from it, failure is the path to success. Now, there is no other path to success except through failure. Failure is the door to success. It's how you become a success. Nobody just has success without any failures unless you just get lucky once, and that's the last time you're going to do that. It's something that you learn from. If you don't learn from your failures, well, then that really is a failure. Proverbs 28, verse 13 says this in the Bible. A man who refuses to admit his mistakes will never be successful. Okay? You're not learning from it and you're not admitting them. But if he confesses and forsakes them, in other words, you learn from your mistakes, he gets another chance. There are some things in life you only learn from failure. You can't learn them any other way. And so if there's some things you only learn from failure, you should stop calling it a failure and start calling it an education. Some of us are highly educated.
Hi, friends. Would it surprise you to know that there are entire groups of people who have never heard about Jesus still in our world today? I'm talking about the small tribes of less than 100,000 people who have never heard the name of Jesus Christ. Would you help me reach these unreached, unengaged people? You know, one of the reasons I started Daily Hope was to find partners who would help us take the hope of the good news of the gospel to the whole world, to the final frontier, these unreached, unengaged tribes. Jesus wants us to witness to all nations and to all people. He never made a person he didn't love. He never made a person he didn't want saved. And Jesus died so that all may be saved. So I'm asking you to help me in this Finishing the Task project.
When you give a gift today, your gift will be doubled by the matching grant up to $100,000. And we'll send you the Purpose-Driven Christmas to say thanks.